Hello, my dear. Tonight I have a lovely cosy tale for you. The Bookshop at the End of Willow Lane. It is a quiet, gentle story filled with old books, glowing lamps, cups of tea, and the soft sound of rain against the windows. Before we begin tonight, I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. If you would like to, you can leave it quietly in the comments below. It is always rather lovely to imagine where you are. And now, make yourself comfortable. Let your head rest softly against the pillow. The day is finished. Everything else can wait until morning. Tonight, we are going to take a very gentle walk to the quietest end of a little English lane. There is no need to hurry there. The shop will still be open when we arrive, and a warm lamp has already been placed in the window. So make yourself comfortable and let the day loosen its hold. You need not remember the names of the streets or keep track of where we have been. I shall know the way, and you may simply listen for as long as you wish. Willow Lane begins just beyond the old stone clock, where the high street narrows and the evening sounds grow soft. In autumn, small bronze leaves collect along the curb, and the light from the bakery falls across them in a pale golden square. The bakery is closing for the day. Behind the misted glass, a young man in a white apron is placing the last 2 loaves upon a wooden shelf. The warm scent of bread lingers near the doorway, mingling with the cool smell of evening rain. Farther along stands a red post-box, its paint made glossy by the damp. Beside it is an iron bench beneath a broad plane tree. The bench is empty now, apart from 3 curled leaves and a small silver trail left by a snail making its patient way home. The cottages of Willow Lane stand close together, as old neighbours sometimes do. Their bricks are softened by time, their slate roofs slope at slightly different angles, and each narrow garden has its own quiet character. One has clipped box hedges and a brass knocker polished bright. Another has a blue wooden gate with a pot of late lavender beside it. A third keeps its curtains half open, showing a lamp, a shelf of china dogs, and the corner of a comfortable armchair. Nothing in the lane appears arranged for display. Bicycles rest against railings. A folded umbrella waits in a porch to dry. Someone has left an empty milk bottle on a step, ready for morning. These ordinary things make the lane feel settled and lived in. The road curves gradually so that its ending cannot be seen from the beginning. With each slow step, the high street recedes a little farther behind us. The last bus sighs at the distant stop, closes its doors, and moves away. For a few moments there is only the soft sound of our footsteps and the faint rustle of leaves along the pavement. Somewhere behind one of the cottages, a garden gate closes with a gentle wooden click. Then the lane bends beneath the branches of an old willow tree. Its narrow leaves hang silver green in the damp air. A few brush the top of the low wall, making a sound so slight that it is almost part of the silence. And there, just beyond the willow, is the bookshop. It is a narrow building with 2 bow windows and a dark green door. The paint is not new, but it has been cared for. Around the brass handle, years of hands have worn the green to a softer shade. Above the windows, faded gold letters spell out the Willow Lane Bookshop. Nobody in the town can quite remember when the sign was painted. It has looked gently weathered for as long as most people have known it. In the left-hand window are several cloth-bound books, a small shaded lamp, and a card written in dark blue ink. The handwriting is neat and rounded. It says, "A book for a quiet hour." The right-hand window holds a deep wicker basket lined with a folded wool blanket. Curled inside it is an elderly brown tabby cat with a white chin. His paws are tucked beneath him, and his eyes are firmly closed. This is Bracken. He has spent the greater part of the afternoon testing each warm place in the shop, and has decided that the window basket is, for now, the best of them. The light from the lamp rests softly on his striped back. Beyond him, shelves rise into the shadows, and the small black stove gives an occasional contented tick as its iron sides cool. There is nothing here asking us to be alert. No secret must be uncovered. No puzzle is waiting behind the door. The shop has only shelves, lamplight, old wood, and enough time for anyone who enters. We step beneath the shallow porch. A drop of rain slips from the gutter and darkens the stone beside us. Through the glass, the rows of books seem still and restful, each one waiting without impatience. The brass handle is cool beneath the hand. The door opens easily, as though it has been expecting no one in particular, yet is pleased that someone has come. Above us, a little bell gives one clear, gentle note. Bracken opens a single green eye, considers the matter, and closes it again. From the back of the shop comes the sound of a cup being placed upon a saucer. Then a warm voice says that we may come in, and that there is no need at all to stand upon ceremony. The door settles into its frame behind us. The rain and the lane remain safely outside, while the light of the bookshop gathers quietly around us. The owner of the Willow Lane Bookshop is called Elspeth Hart. She's in her late 70s, with silver hair gathered into a loose twist and a fondness for cardigans with deep, useful pockets. Elspeth has lived above the shop for many years. each morning she comes down the narrow staircase before the town is properly awake, carrying the empty teacup she left beside her bed the night before. On Monday morning the first light is pale and pearly. It finds the top branches of the willow tree, the chimney pots along the lane, and finally the bookshop windows, where it rests upon the glass without quite entering. Elspeth unlocks the green door from within and steps outside with a soft broom. She wears a moss-coloured cardigan, a long brown skirt, and the sensible shoes she keeps by the bottom stair. She begins at one end of the step and sweeps towards the other. The broom makes a dry, comforting whisper over the stone. Leaves, a little dust, and 2 small feathers gather into a tidy heap beside the wall. Elspeth does not rush the work. She pauses to straighten the doormat, brushes a thread of willow leaf from the window ledge, and looks along the lane to see what sort of morning has arrived. It is the sort that promises drizzle later. The roofs are dark with dew, and the air smells of wet brick, chimney smoke, and the first bread baking at the corner. When the step is clean, Elspeth turns the wooden sign in the door from closed to open. The word has been repainted many times, most recently by Miriam Vale, who lives 2 doors away and has the steadiest hand in Willow Lane. Inside, the shop is still cool. Elspeth kneels beside the little black stove, lays 2 pieces of kindling across yesterday's ash, and adds a twist of brown paper. The match gives a brief golden flare. Soon the kindling begins to crackle. Elspeth adds 1 small log, closes the iron door, and listens until the fire is breathing steadily. Warmth will take its time reaching the far shelves, but that is perfectly all right. Next she winds the clock above the counter. It is a round clock with black hands and a cream face. Its key lives in the left-hand drawer, beside sealing wax, spare labels, and 3 peppermints wrapped in striped paper. The clock is never exact. It tends to lose 4 minutes by Wednesday and regain 2 of them on Friday. Elspeth sees no reason to interfere with a habit so long established. She turns the key until it resists, then gives the wooden case a fond little pat. The clock answers with a dependable tick, followed by another, and then another. At the window, Bracken remains in his basket. He has rearranged himself during the night so that his head rests upon the folded edge of the blanket. 1 white-tipped paw hangs over the side. Elspeth fills his blue dish and sets it beside the counter. Bracken opens both eyes. He stretches each front leg with great care, steps from the basket, and walks towards breakfast at the measured pace of someone who knows it cannot possibly be given to anybody else. While he eats, Elspeth goes through the curtain into the back room. It is a small, square space with a deep white sink, a wooden table, and a window looking onto the courtyard. Ferns grow between the courtyard stones. A clay pot holds rosemary, another holds thyme, and rainwater from the roof gathers in an old green barrel. The morning is so still that each plant seems to be waiting for the day to begin. Elspeth fills the kettle and places it on the little electric ring. She chooses a blue and white mug, warms it with a splash of hot water, and measures 1 spoonful of tea into the brown pot. These actions have been repeated so often that her hands know them without instruction. Kettle, pot, spoon, mug, a little milk from the bottle in the pool cupboard. The tea cosy, faded at one corner, settled over the pot. While the tea draws, she cuts a slice from yesterday's loaf and lowers it into the toaster. Bracken appears in the doorway just as it rises. He sits down, wrapping his tail neatly around his feet. Elspeth tells him that he has already had his breakfast. Bracken looks towards the toast, then towards Elspeth, as though this information is interesting but not entirely relevant. She spreads the toast with butter and takes it to the counter with her tea. The shop is warming now. The clock ticks softly. The clock keeps time in its own fashion, and the faint smell of beeswax rises from the old wooden shelves. Before customers arrive, Elspeth writes the card for the window. She keeps a small stack of cream cards beneath the till, and a fountain pen filled with dark blue ink. Some mornings the words come immediately. On others she waits, drinks half her tea, and watches the lane. Today she writes slowly, a book for a quiet hour. She carries the card to the front window and props it between a book of English gardens and a small collection of nature essays. The lamp beside them is not needed in the morning, but Elspeth switches it on anyway. There are certain lights, she believes, that are meant less for seeing than for welcoming. The first hour passes gently. Elspeth sorts yesterday's returned books, checks a parcel awaiting collection, and dusts the shelf where the travel books lean one another like passengers on a long journey. Bracken moves from his empty breakfast dish to the windowsill, from the windowsill to the rug, and from the rug to the stool behind the counter. Each place receives a fair and unhurried trial. At 9:30, the bakery door opens down the lane. A warm ribbon of air carries the scent of currant buns towards the bookshop. Elspeth pauses with a duster in her hand and breathes it in. The clock gives a small preparatory click, though it is nowhere near the hour. At almost the same moment, the brass bell above the door rings. Elspeth looks up with a smile. The shop, warmed and wound and properly awake, is ready for its first visitor. Tom Bell stands in the doorway with a canvas post bag over one shoulder and a small parcel tucked beneath his arm. Fine drops of rain shine on the shoulders of his navy coat. He has delivered letters along Willow Lane for nearly 20 years. He knows which gates stick in damp weather, which letterboxes snap shut upon the fingers, and which dogs prefer a quiet word before allowing him near the garden path. Elspeth tells him to come in before the rain decides to become serious. Tom steps onto the mat and wipes his shoes carefully, though they are no wetter than the shoes of anyone else who has entered the shop in autumn. The parcel is addressed to Elspeth. It contains 3 second-hand books sent by a dealer in York, all wrapped in tissue paper and tied together with ordinary white string. Tom sets it upon the counter. Bracken, who has been asleep on the stool, lifts his head and sniffs one corner. Finding no immediate reason for concern, he places his chin back upon his paws. Elspeth asks whether Tom has 5 minutes for a cup of tea. Tom looks towards the window, where the rain has begun to draw thin lines down the glass. He says he has exactly 5, provided nobody along the lane has ordered a grand piano by post. Elspeth assures him that the residents of Willow Lane have been restrained in their piano buying lately. She goes into the back room and pours a second mug from the pot. Tom chooses the worn armchair beside the stove. It gives a familiar sigh when he sits down. He places his cap on one knee and stretches his feet towards the warmth without taking off his shoes. For a little while, neither of them says very much. The rain touches the bow window. The clock ticks above the counter. Somewhere on the upper shelves, an old book settles with a faint papery sound. Tom drinks his tea and looks around the shop. He knows its shelves well enough, but books seem different when one is seated with a warm mug instead of standing in a wet coat. He says that he has been meaning to ask Elspeth for something to read. He used to enjoy long novels, the sort with maps at the front and lists of characters, but lately he cannot seem to begin one. By the time he reaches home, makes his supper, and sits down, a long book feels like another route waiting to be completed. He reads 3 pages, thinks about the next morning's post, and closes it again. Elspeth nods. She does not tell him that he ought to try harder, or that the right great novel will transform his evenings. She asks only how much reading would feel pleasant rather than dutiful. Tom considers this. Perhaps 10 minutes, he says, 15 on a Sunday, something that finishes before his tea grows cold. Elspeth sets down her mug and walks to the travel shelf. She runs one finger along the spines, passing guidebooks, walking journals, and a heavy volume about voyages around the world. Near the end is a small cloth-bound book the colour of a cloudy sky. Its gold lettering has faded, but the title can still be read. Quiet Journeys by Rail. It is a collection of short pieces written many years ago. Each describes an ordinary train journey through a different part of Britain, across marshes in Norfolk, beside the sea in Devon, through snow in the Pennines, and into a quiet London station before dawn. No piece is longer than 8 pages. There are no complicated timetables to follow, no adventure, and no need to remember what happened in the chapter before. Elspeth hands the book to Tom. He turns it over, feels the worn cloth beneath his thumb, and opens it near the beginning. The first piece is about a branch line train travelling through Somerset on a misty morning. Tom reads the opening paragraph while the rain taps gently at the glass. His face does not change very much, but his shoulders settle lower in the armchair. He turns one page, then glances at the clock. His 5 minutes have become 9. The clock may be partly responsible, although nobody could say for certain. Tom closes the book with one finger holding his place. He says it will do very nicely. Elspeth finds a plain paper bookmark and writes Willow Lane Bookshop across the bottom. Because the rain is a little heavier now, she wraps the book in brown paper. She folds the corners closely, secures them with a strip of paper tape, and ties the parcel with blue cotton string. Tom watches her hands. There is something restful in the way the paper is measured, folded and smoothed. The book becomes a tidy parcel, square at the edges and safe from the weather. Elspeth leaves one end of the string long enough to make a small loop. Tom slips 2 fingers through it and says it is the easiest parcel he has carried all morning. Before he goes, he finishes the last mouthful of tea. The armchair gives another soft sigh as he stands. He puts on his cap, shoulders the post bag, and places the wrapped book carefully inside, away from any damp envelopes. The bell rings as Elspeth opens the door. Cool air enters with the smell of wet leaves. Tom steps back onto Willow Lane and begins walking towards the cottage with the blue gate. Through the window, Elspeth watches him pause beneath the willow tree to adjust his bag. The parcel rests securely near the top. That evening, after his round is finished and supper is cleared away, Tom will put his feet up and read about the little train through Somerset. He may finish the whole piece, or he may not. Either way, the book will wait beside his chair without asking him to hurry. After Tom leaves, the rain continues for most of the morning. It is a mild, steady rain, too soft to rattle the windows and too persistent to be ignored. Only 3 other customers come before lunch. A woman buys a book of crossword puzzles. An elderly man returns a volume about local churches. A child in a yellow raincoat chooses a postcard with an owl upon it and counts out the coins very carefully. Between visitors, Elspeth begins preparing for Saturday's evening of quiet reading. The gathering has taken place each autumn for several years. It is not advertised beyond Willow Lane and the streets nearby. There are no speeches, performances, or organised discussions. People come into the shop, choose something to read, take a cup of tea, and sit together quietly for an hour or two. Some read a great many pages. Some read the same paragraph twice. One or two fall asleep. Elspeth considers all of these perfectly suitable ways to spend an evening in a bookshop. She begins with the drawer of bookmarks beneath the counter. It is deeper than it appears and contains ribbons, printed cards, pressed leaves, narrow strips of marbled paper, and several items that were never intended to be bookmarks at all. There is an old train ticket, a clean paper luggage label, a recipe for ginger biscuits, and a postcard showing a bandstand beside the sea. Elspeth places each object in a shallow wooden tray. Bracken sits on the counter and watches. When a green ribbon passes within reach, he rests one paw upon it. He does not pull it away. He simply believes that the ribbon will be improved by remaining where he has put it. Elspeth works around his paw. She sorts the bookmarks by size, straightens the corners, and ties the loose ribbons into small bundles. At the back of the drawer she finds a folded list in Miriam's careful handwriting. It was made for an evening of quiet reading 3 years earlier. 6 blue mugs, it says, 4 green mugs, tea, milk, lemon and honey, 2 extra cushions, the less scratchy blankets. Move Bracken before lighting the stove. Elspeth smiles at the final instruction. Bracken, now stretched across the counter, looks entirely innocent of ever having obstructed a stove. She places the list beside the kill. Most of its advice is still useful. The blue mugs remain in the back room, the cushions live in the cupboard beneath the stairs, and the less scratchy blankets are folded in a cedar chest upstairs. Before fetching them, Elspeth decides to dust the lamps. The shop has 7, each with a different shade. None provides a great deal of light alone, but together they make every corner feel gently occupied. She unplugs the lamp in the front window and wipes its cream shade with a soft cloth. A little grey dust gathers along the seam. When she replaces the shade, the light falls more clearly on the card and the cloth-bound books. The lamp beside the travel shelf has a green glass base. The one near the stove has a pleated shade the colour of honey. A very small lamp sits upon the bottom step of the rolling ladder, illuminating nothing in particular. Elspeth dusts them one by one, shade, base, cord, table. Then she switches each lamp on, and stands back to see how the light rests among the shelves. Outside, the afternoon remains silver with rain. Inside, small pools of gold appear along the room. The old rug shows faded reds and blues. The brass corners of the till glow softly. Next comes the counter. Elspeth moves the tray of bookmarks, the pen stand, and Bracken in that order. Bracken allows himself to be transferred to the stool with a dignity that suggests the move was his own idea. From the cupboard, Elspeth takes a tin of beeswax polish. She uses only a little, working it into the wood with a square of old cotton. The counter has been touched by thousands of hands. Children have leaned upon it to reach jars of pencils. Customers have placed umbrellas, handbags, parcels, and carefully counted coins upon it. Near the till is a shallow mark left by a candle stand many winters ago. As Elspeth polishes, the wood grows darker and warmer. The room fills with the clean, mellow scent of beeswax. It mingles with the paper, the rain, and the faint remains of the morning fire. When the counter is done, she carries a cardboard box from the back room. Inside is a string of tiny shaded lights used only for the reading evening. Each bulb wears a little paper shade, cream or pale green. Elspeth lays the string along the counter and checks the wire for tangles. There are only 2, and neither is difficult. She loosens the first with her fingertips, follows the wire to the second, and frees it from around a shade. Then she plugs the lights into the socket beside the clock. One after another, the little shades begin to glow. Elspeth carries the string around the room, draping it along the upper edge of the central shelves. She steps back, moves one section slightly to the left, and decides that will do. By 4 o'clock, the rain has faded to a fine mist. Elspeth goes upstairs for the blankets and returns with them over one arm. There is a rust-coloured blanket, 2 in soft wool, and 1 green blanket with a satin edge. She unfolds each, checks it for dust, and folds it again into a neat rectangle. The least scratchy is the grey one with a darned corner. Elspeth places it on the armchair nearest the stove, where it will be easy to find. From beneath the stairs she brings 4 cushions, each softened by years of use. She pats them into shape and tries them in different chairs. One chair needs a cushion at the back, another needs one beneath the arm. The wicker chair by the nature shelf is comfortable exactly as it is. Nothing has to be decided at once. Elspeth moves slowly around the room, viewing it from the doorway, the counter, and the stove. Bracken follows at a distance, testing any chair left unattended. At last, the lamps are clean, the counter shines, the bookmarks are sorted, and the lights rest in a soft line above the shelves. Elspeth makes a fresh pot of tea. She chooses the armchair beside the stove, lifts the grey blanket, and discovers that Bracken has already settled beneath one corner. There is room for both of them. Elspeth sits, places the blanket across her knees, and drinks her tea, while evening gathers beyond the windows. Saturday is still several days away. There will be mugs to arrange and buns to collect, but none of that needs doing now. For now the shop is warm, the blue string has been returned to its drawer, and every small light is exactly where it needs to be. On Tuesday evening, the sky clears just before sunset. The wet roofs of Willow Lane hold the last pale light, and every window seems a little brighter against the deepening blue. Elspeth is reshelving a book of poems when she sees a woman pause outside the shop. The woman has walked past several times during the week, usually carrying a canvas bag or a small bunch of keys. Her name is Clara Fenwick, though Elspeth does not know this yet. Clara has recently moved into the cottage with the blue gate and the pot of lavender beside it. The cottage is pleasant and well cared for. Its front room has a small fireplace, 2 deep windows, and shelves built into the alcoves. Clara liked it immediately when she first viewed it on a bright afternoon in June. Now it is autumn, and the rooms still feel faintly borrowed. She knows where everything is, but she does not yet move through the cottage without thinking. At night, one floorboard near the kitchen gives a soft creak. The hot water tap turns farther than expected. The bedroom curtains meet in the middle only when the left one is pulled first. None of these things is troubling. They are simply the little facts by which a house slowly becomes familiar. This evening Clara has gone out for a short walk after unpacking the final box of books. She intended to circle the stone clock and return home, but the lamp in the bookshop window has caught her attention. She reads the handwritten card, "A book for a quiet hour." Inside, Bracken is sitting directly beneath the lamp, washing one paw. Clara smiles. She takes hold of the brass handle and opens the green door. The bell gives its gentle note. Elspeth looks up from the poetry shelf and says good evening, as though Clara has been expected but is under no obligation to explain her arrival. Clara steps inside. The air smells of paper, beeswax, and the remains of the afternoon fire. Somewhere nearby there is also the faint scent of toast. Elspeth asks whether she would like to leave her coat on the hook beside the door. Clara does, and the simple act makes it easier to stay. She begins with the table of new arrivals. Elspeth returns to her shelving and gives Clara the gift of being left alone. The shop is quiet but not silent. The clock ticks above the counter. Pages whisper as Clara turns them. Now and then a car passes at the far end of the lane, its sound fading before it reaches the willow tree. Clara moves from the new arrivals to the cookery shelf, then to local history. She picks up a book about old market towns and studies a black and white photograph of a street lined with striped awnings. She returns it carefully. There is no need to choose the first book she touches. At the nature shelf she finds field guides to birds, trees, flowers and mushrooms. Several contain penciled notes from former owners. Beside them is a slim book about walking beside rivers. Elspeth brings a tray from the back room with 2 mugs of tea. She asks only whether Clara takes milk. Then she places 1 mug on the small table near the wicker chair. Clara thanks her and sits down. Bracken appears from beneath the window display, walks around the chair once, and settles on the rug nearby. For a few minutes, Clara holds the warm mug between her hands. She looks at the lamps, the worn shelves, and the rolling ladder whose wheels do not appear to have rolled in some time. She says that she has moved into the cottage with the blue gate. Elspeth knows the one. It has a good little garden at the back and a cupboard beneath the stairs that is deeper than it looks. Clara laughs softly. She has already discovered the cupboard. It contained a folding stool, a jar of picture hooks, and 1 wooden clothes peg. Elspeth says this sounds like an excellent beginning for a useful cupboard. Clara looks down into her tea. She explains that the cottage is lovely. Truly it is. It simply does not feel like hers yet. The rooms look arranged, but not settled. Elspeth nods. A new home, she says, must learn a person's footsteps. It takes a little while for the stairs to recognize the hour you come down, and for the kitchen to know which sounds belong to breakfast. Clara likes this thought. It asks nothing of her except time. Elspeth does not suggest a list of improvements. She does not advise different curtains or a larger rug. Instead, she asks what kind of book Clara would like to leave on the table beside her new armchair. Not necessarily a book to read from beginning to end, just something that would look as though it had chosen to live there. Clara considers the question. She would like a book about houses, perhaps, but not grand houses with ropes across the doorways. Small houses, gardens, and rooms where people actually drink tea. Elspeth leads her towards a low shelf near the back. The books there are too large for the ordinary cases, so they lie flat in 2 careful stacks. She removes the 3rd book from the lower stack. It is bound in faded green cloth and titled The English Home Through the Seasons. Inside are watercolour pictures of cottage kitchens, window seats, walled gardens, linen cupboards and fires laid ready for winter. The pages are thick and slightly rough at the edges. Clara carries the book to the table and opens it in the middle. The picture shows a narrow hallway with walking sticks in a blue pot and a pair of muddy boots upon a tiled floor. As she turns the next page, something slips from between the leaves and settles upon her skirt. It is a pressed willow leaf, long and narrow, faded to the colour of old gold. Elspeth looks at it with mild interest. She does not remember placing it there, though leaves find their way into books for all sorts of reasons. Clara lifts it carefully by the stem. The leaf is perfectly flat and still carries the delicate line of every vein. Elspeth finds a narrow paper sleeve in the bookmark drawer and slides the leaf inside. She tells Clara it may stay with the book if she likes. A house book ought to have something from its new street. Clara places the sleeved leaf between the pages showing the tiled hallway. She closes the cover, resting one hand upon the faded green cloth. The book is not rare, and the leaf is not a message that needs to be understood, yet together they feel quietly suited to the cottage with the blue gate. Elspeth wraps the book in brown paper because the evening air is damp. She ties it with blue string and leaves a loop at the top, just as she did for Tom. Clara puts on her coat. Bracken rises from the rug, stretches, and escorts her as far as the mat before deciding that his responsibilities have been fulfilled. At the door, Elspeth mentions the evening of quiet reading on Saturday. Clara may come if she wishes. She may read, listen to the rain, or simply sit near the stove. There is no need to answer now. Clara steps outside with the parcel hanging from 2 fingers. The lane is darkening, but the stones still shine faintly from the earlier rain. At the blue gate she turns back. The bookshop lamp glows beneath the willow branches, and Bracken's striped shape has already returned to the window. Inside the cottage, Clara places the green book on the table beside her armchair. She makes tea in the kitchen, remembering to turn the hot tap a little farther than seems necessary. Then she sits down and opens the book to the picture of the narrow hallway. The pressed willow leaf rests safely in its paper sleeve. The board barn near the kitchen gives its usual soft creak. This time Clara recognizes the sound before it comes. The cottage is not entirely familiar yet. It does not need to be. There will be other evenings, other cups of tea, and many small footsteps for the rooms to learn. For now, one book has found its place beside the chair, and that is more than enough. Wednesday arrives beneath a low grey sky, and by the time Elspeth has swept the step, rain has begun to fall over Willow Lane. It is not a hurried rain. It gathers first in tiny beads along the green door, then darkens the paving stones one by one. Soon a soft veil hangs between the bookshop and the cottages opposite. The willow tree bends its narrow leaves beneath the water. Each branch holds still for a moment, then releases a shining drop onto the wall below. Inside the shop, Elspeth lights the stove earlier than usual. She adds 2 small logs and leaves the iron door open just long enough to see the flames settle around them. Bracken watches from the rug. He has already inspected the window basket and found it cooler than he would prefer. When the first warmth reaches him, he rolls onto one side and stretches his paws towards the stove. The rain keeps most people at home. A man in a waxed coat comes in for a walking map, and Miriam Vale returns a book through the half-open door without removing her hood. After that, the bell remains quiet. Elspeth does not mind an empty shop on a rainy day. There are returns to shelve, labels to write, and the kind of small work that becomes easier when nobody is in need of assistance. She begins with a stack beside the till. Each book receives a brief dusting and a penciled mark on its card before returning to its place. A history of canals goes to the local shelf. A collection of poems belongs beside the window. A book about wildflowers returns to the nature section, where it leans comfortably between birds and trees. The rain runs down the bow windows in wandering lines. Through them, Willow Lane appears softened at the edges. The red post-box is a blurred patch of colour, and the cottages seem farther away than they did yesterday. At 11:30, Elspeth puts the kettle on. She slices bread for toast and spreads it with butter while it is still hot enough to melt into the surface. Bracken appears in the back room doorway, as he always does when toast is involved. Elspeth tells him that his knowledge of the shop's timetable is remarkable, though not always useful. She breaks off a corner no larger than a postage stamp and places it in his dish. Bracken eats it, considers the empty dish, and then settles beneath the table as though no further expectations remain. Elspeth carries her tea and toast to the armchair beside the stove. The grey blanket with the darned corner is folded over one arm. She draws it across her knees and rests the plate on the little wooden table. For a while she listens to the different sounds the rain makes. It taps the front windows lightly, lands with a hollow note on the water barrel, and falls from the courtyard gutter in a slow, steady thread. When the toast is finished, Elspeth takes the empty plate to the sink. The courtyard beyond the window is bright with rain. Ferns bend over the stones, and drops tremble upon the rosemary like small glass beads. Near the wall, a shallow puddle reflects the back room window. The reflection contains only warm yellow light, the edge of the curtain, and, for a moment, Elspeth's blue and white mug. She dries the plate and returns to the shop. Bracken has moved from beneath the table into the armchair, where he is resting precisely in the warm hollow left by Elspeth. There are other chairs. Elspeth chooses the wicker one beside the nature shelf and takes a book from the little stack awaiting inspection. It is a plain brown volume with no title on the cover. When she opens it, she finds a series of short essays about weather, hedgerows, and quiet country paths. Elsbeth reads one about rain falling on an orchard at the end of summer. The writer describes water collecting in the hollows of apples and a robin sheltering beneath an old wooden cart. The essay is only 4 pages long, so when Elsbeth reaches the end, she closes the book upon one finger and lets the images remain for a while. The shop gives a small settling creak. The clock ticks. The fire moves quietly behind its iron door. Nothing else asks for her attention. After a few minutes, Elsbeth notices another book resting on the return shelf near the counter. It is bound in green cloth and placed neatly between 2 volumes she shelved that morning. She does not remember anyone bringing it in. Its card bears no recent date, and there is no slip beside the till. The title is A Year of Courtyard Gardens. Elsbeth opens it to a picture of ferns growing between wet stones, very much like the little courtyard behind the shop. She glances towards the back room. Rain silvering the window, green leaves, old brick, and the water barrel are all exactly where they have always been. Perhaps the book was already on the shelf. Perhaps Elsbeth moved it without noticing while her thoughts were elsewhere. Bookshops are full of objects that seem to know their own places. She sets the courtyard book beside the brown volume and returns to her reading. By mid-afternoon, the rain becomes finer. The cottages slowly regain their clear edges, and a bicycle passes along the lane with a gentle hiss of tyres on wet stone. Elsbeth makes one more cup of tea. Bracken remains asleep in the armchair, the blanket gathered around him, and one white-tipped paw resting upon the fold. The day has brought no important news and nothing that must be remembered. It has brought only rain, toast, warm chairs, and 2 quiet books. For a Wednesday in Willow Lane, that is quite enough. On Thursday afternoon, the rain lifts and a pale brightness spreads across the lane. The bakery door stands open, allowing the smell of warm bread to drift as far as the willow tree. Elsbeth is writing labels at the counter when the bell rings and Samir Patel enters carrying a round loaf wrapped in white paper. Samir runs the bakery near the corner. He begins work while most of Willow Lane is asleep and has often mixed the first dough before the stone clock strikes 4. By early afternoon, his working day is almost over. He has swept flour from the floor, covered the remaining cakes, and written tomorrow's orders on a pad beside the till. The loaf he brings Elspeth is still faintly warm. Its crust is dark gold and scattered with a little flour. Samir says it came from a batch that rose more enthusiastically than expected. There is nothing wrong with it, but it is slightly too round for the bakery shelves. Elspeth accepts this explanation without questioning whether a loaf can truly be too round. She places it in the back room and puts the kettle on. Samir takes off his coat and sits on the stool near the counter. Bracken approaches, sniffs one trouser leg, and then stations himself beside the curtain leading to the loaf. Elspeth returns with tea and 2 slices of the warm bread spread simply with butter. The inside is soft and gives off a gentle wisp of steam when she tears her slice in half. For a few minutes they eat without talking. Outside, drops fall from the willow leaves, although the rain itself has stopped. Samir looks along the shelves. He says that he keeps buying books and placing them beside his bed. He likes the thought of reading before sleep, but rarely manages more than a few pages. Some nights he remembers an order for 6 rye loaves. On others he wonders whether he locked the flour cupboard, even though he knows that he did. If a chapter is long, he tries to finish it. The effort keeps him awake for 10 minutes, and then he falls asleep before the final page anyway. Elspeth tells him that falling asleep over a book is not a failure of reading. It may simply mean the book has done its evening work. Samir smiles and agrees that several of his books have been extremely successful in that respect. Elspeth asks whether he might enjoy stories that finish quickly. Not stories that hurry, but ones small enough to be held in a single sitting. She leads him to a shelf near the children's classics, where illustrated myths, legends, and folk tales are kept for readers of any age. The book she chooses is wide and not very thick. Its cloth cover is midnight blue, patterned with tiny silver leaves. Inside, every story is 4 or 5 pages long. There is a tale about a tailor who makes a coat for winter, another about a fisherman who shares his lunch with a heron, and one about an old woman who keeps a lantern burning beside a country road. Nobody is chased, tested, or placed in danger. The stories turn upon kindness, patience, and the pleasure of ordinary things being made well. Samir opens the book to the lantern story. The pictures show a small stone cottage, a low wall, and a circle of warm light resting on the road. He reads the first page while Elspeth carries the empty plates to the back room. When she returns, he has reached the final picture. The old woman in the story has gone to bed, but the lantern remains in the window for travellers passing quietly through the night. Samir closes the book. He says that is exactly the right length, long enough to go somewhere and short enough to come home again. Elspeth finds a bookmark made from marbled blue paper. She writes nothing upon it. The silver swirls already look rather like moonlit clouds and require no improvement. Samir slips it into the lantern story. He will begin there again tonight, even though he already knows how it ends. Before leaving, he asks about Saturday's evening of quiet reading. Elspeth says there will be several chairs, plenty of tea, and no requirement to remain awake. Samir says this makes it the most welcoming event he has heard of all year. He offers to bring a tray of currant buns before the bakery closes. Elspeth tells him that a small tray will be more than enough. Samir knows from experience that her idea of small and a baker's idea of small are not always the same. She wraps the book in brown paper and ties it with blue string. The parcel is flatter than the loaf and sits easily beneath Samir's arm. The bell gives a soft note as he steps outside. Evening has begun to settle over the lane, and the bakery windows are already dark. At home, Samir will place the book beside his bed. He may read The Tailor's Winter Coat, or The Fisherman and the Heron, or The Lantern Story once more. When his eyes grow heavy, he can close the book wherever he happens to be. Every story will wait patiently behind its own few pages. Friday morning is clear and cool. A light wind moves along Willow Lane, carrying leaves towards the iron bench and setting the willow branches in quiet motion. Soon after Elspeth opens the shop, Arthur Green arrives from the allotments by the narrow passage behind the cottages. Arthur is in his late 60s and wears an old green jacket with soil at one cuff. In one hand he carries a small bunch of herbs tied with garden twine. There is sage, rosemary, and the last tender sprigs of mint. Arthur sets them on the counter, and their clean green scent rises among the books. He says the mint will not last much longer now that the nights are colder. Elspeth tells him it has already done very well for the middle of autumn. Arthur has been clearing bean canes and folding netting in the allotment shed. The beds look bare after summer, and the paths seem wider without courgette leaves and rows of tall peas. He does not dislike winter. He enjoys seed catalogues, thick soup, and the satisfaction of tools cleaned and hung in order. Even so, the end of the growing year always leaves the afternoons feeling a little empty. Elspeth puts the herbs in a jam jar with water and places it on the back room table. Then she makes tea and brings the pot into the shop. Arthur chooses the wicker chair. Bracken circles his boots, discovers the interesting scent of soil, and settles on the rug nearby. They talk about the allotments. Arthur describes the blackbird that follows his digging and the neat row of cabbages belonging to Mrs. Lane from the post office. Nothing is wrong in the garden. It is simply entering its quieter season. Elspeth remembers a book on the lower nature shelf. It is an old gardener's diary, arranged month by month, with notes about weather, soil, and the work that continues after the last flowers have faded. The cover is plain brown, and the corners have become soft. A former owner has added small pencil marks in the margins. In November, the writer describes spreading leaf mould beneath bare currant bushes. In December, he sharpens tools, cleans pots, and orders seeds. In January, he notices the first pale shoots beneath a layer of straw. Arthur turns the pages slowly. Beside one passage, someone has written, "Remember that stillness is also part of growing." The note is not grandly phrased. It is written in ordinary pencil, with the final word pressed more deeply into the paper than the others. Arthur reads it twice. He says the person who wrote it must have known a thing or two about winter gardens. Elspeth agrees. A garden beneath the ground may be busy in ways that cannot yet be seen. Roots settle, bulbs hold their shape, and the soil keeps what it has been given. Arthur continues through the diary. He finds a list of seeds ordered one February, broad beans, sweet peas, radishes, and an old-fashioned name. The list pleases him. He has his own catalogue waiting on the kitchen table, with several corners already folded down. Elspeth offers to lend him the diary for as long as he likes. Arthur says he will return it some day, though he makes no promise about when. That is exactly the arrangement Elspeth had in mind. She gives him the postcard of the seaside bandstand to use as a bookmark. Arthur studies it and says the empty flower beds around the bandstand could do with some winter pansies. Elspeth said she had been thinking the same thing. Arthur tucks the postcard into December, where the diary speaks of cleaning seed trays beside a kitchen fire. Before he leaves, he mentions the reading evening. He will come after checking the allotment gates. He may bring a few dried honesty stems for the counter if Elspeth would like them. She said they would catch the lamplight beautifully. The bell rings as Arthur steps into the clear morning. He carries the diary beneath his arm and the empty twine from the herbs in his pocket. Elspeth watches him walk beneath the willow tree towards the allotment passage. A leaf lands upon his shoulder and stays there until he turns the corner. Inside, the herbs rest in their jar. The shop smells faintly of rosemary, warm paper, and the first cup of tea. Winter will come in its own time. For now, the garden beneath the ground is quiet, and Arthur has a diary full of small tasks for the darker days. Miriam Vale visits later that afternoon, having remembered that her library card was still being used as a bookmark in the book she returned through the rainy doorway that morning. Miriam is a retired primary school teacher with soft grey hair and a clear, steady way of speaking. She lives 2 doors from the shop and has known Elspeth for many years. Elspeth retrieves the card from between the book's pages and places it on the counter. Miriam accepts tea without needing to be asked twice, and Elspeth pours it into the green mug she usually chooses. The 2 women sit near the stove. Bracken occupies the space between their chairs, arranged so that either person may reach down and stroke his back. Miriam says that she has been reading less lately. She still takes books home and places them beside her chair, but her attention seems to slip away after a paragraph or 2. Sometimes she reads the same page 3 times and could not afterwards say what happened upon it. Elspeth asks whether this troubles her. Miriam thinks for a moment and says it does only because reading used to feel effortless. Elspeth tells her that effortlessness may return more easily when it is not being watched for. She goes to the window display and picks up the slim collection of nature essays that stood beside the handwritten card earlier in the week. The essays are very short. One describes frost forming around a gate latch. Another follows a wren searching beneath autumn leaves. A third considers the smooth stones found at the edge of a river. Each page contains one complete observation. There are no characters to remember, and no story waiting impatiently beyond the next chapter. Miriam opens the book to a page about a field seen from a train. The writer notices sheep standing beneath an oak tree and a red scarf caught on a distant hedge. Elspeth takes the brown book of weather essays from the side table. For a little while, both women read. The clock ticks above the counter. The stove gives a small metallic sigh. Bracken's breathing becomes slow and regular between the chairs. Miriam reaches the bottom of her page. She does not turn it at once. She looks again at the picture of the field formed by the words, then closes the book with her finger inside. One page, she says, has been quite enough for today. Elspeth agrees. A page is not a doorway that locks behind a reader. It may be opened again whenever the time feels right. Miriam finishes her tea and reads the page once more, not because she has forgotten it, but because she likes the oak tree and the small red scarf upon the hedge. This time she turns the page. The next essay concerns rain on a greenhouse roof. She reads only the first sentence before closing the cover. That will be a page for another afternoon. Elspeth slips the returned library card into the book. It is an excellent bookmark after all, and Miriam is unlikely to lose it twice in the same week. Miriam says she will bring shortbread for Saturday. She has a round blue tin that holds exactly the right amount for a room of quiet readers. Elspeth asks whether she means the tin that once held sewing buttons. Miriam says the buttons have been promoted to a larger tin and are doing very well. They leave the matter there. When Miriam rises, Bracken remains on the rug and opens one eye. She tells him there is no need for him to move on her account. He accepts this assurance. Miriam walks home with the nature essays beneath her arm. 2 doors away, she will place the book beside the lamp and perhaps read the greenhouse page after supper. Or perhaps she will read it tomorrow. One page has already been read slowly and pleasantly, and nothing more is required. Saturday begins with a pale strip of sunlight beneath the clouds. By afternoon, the light has softened, and the shop windows reflect the willow branches moving gently above the lane. Elspeth spends the morning arranging the room for the evening of quiet reading. She wants every visitor to feel that a chair has been waiting without anyone needing to say so. She starts beside the stove. The worn armchair remains where it is, with the grey blanket folded over one side. The second armchair is turned slightly towards the nature shelves rather than towards the room. The wicker chair moves closer to the window. A straight-backed chair from the kitchen is softened with the rust-coloured cushion. Two smaller chairs are placed near the travel section. None faces another directly. People may look into a book, towards the fire, or through the darkening glass without feeling watched. Bracken follows the work with interest. Each time Elspeth moves a chair, he sits in the place it has left and considers whether the arrangement was better before. Once the chairs are settled, Elspeth folds the blankets. Grey upon the armchair, green upon the wicker chair, rust-coloured wool in a basket near the stove. She polishes the lamps once more, although they do not need it, and switches them on as the afternoon grows dim. 7 warm pools of light appear around the shop. The tiny shaded bulbs above the middle shelves add a quiet line of cream and pale green. On the counter, Elspeth places a cream card written in blue ink. It says, "Read, rest, or simply listen to the rain." There is no rain at present, but the evening may yet provide some. In the back room she arranges the mugs, 6 blue, 4 green, and 3 that match neither group. The mismatched mugs are placed among the others rather than hidden behind them. Beside the kettle are tea, milk, lemon, and honey. A jug of water stands near the courtyard window. Elspeth sets out small plates and unfolds a white cloth over the wooden table. The first contribution arrives before 4. Clara comes through the door carrying a little terracotta pot of thyme. She says the plant looked lonely upon the stall by the stone clock. It might prefer the company of the courtyard herbs. Elspeth carries it to the back window. The thyme's small leaves release a clean scent when she brushes them with one finger. Clara stays to help place bookmarks on the chairs. She chooses the pressed willow leaf for her own book and sets a ribbon, a marbled card, or a clean paper label beside each of the others. Arthur arrives next with 3 dried honesty stems wrapped in newspaper. Their round silver seed heads are thin enough for the lamplight to shine through. Elspeth places them in a blue jug on the counter. Arthur turns the jug slightly until the stems cast soft circular shadows on the wall. Miriam brings the round blue tin of shortbread. When the lid is lifted, the biscuits lie in 2 neat layers, separated by paper. She insists that one broken biscuit must be tested immediately. Elspeth, Miriam, and Clara share it between them. Bracken receives none, having already eaten his supper and shown no previous interest in shortbread. At 5:30, Samir delivers a tray of currant buns from the bakery. His idea of a small tray is, as expected, generous. The buns are glazed lightly and still warm beneath their paper covering. Elspeth places half on a plate and keeps the rest wrapped for later. Tom pauses on his final round to return the blue string from his railway book. He has finished 2 journeys and has not yet left Somerset. Elspeth tells him the string was never expected back. Tom says a postman dislikes seeing useful packing material go astray. He winds it neatly around 2 fingers and places it in the drawer of bookmarks, where it looks entirely at home. By 6 o'clock the room has gathered all the small signs of the people who will soon sit within it. Thyme rests beside the courtyard window. Silver seed heads catch the light upon the counter. Shortbread waits in the blue tin, and currant buns fill the back room with the scent of warm spice. Elspeth checks the stove and adds 1 log. She lowers the kettle onto its ring and listens for the first quiet movement of water. Clara straightens the cream card. Arthur chooses the chair near the gardening books. Miriam places the nature essays beside the green mug she will use later. There is nothing grand about the preparations. No ribbon is tied across the door, and no announcement will be made beyond a few words of welcome. The shop simply feels ready. Elspeth stands behind the polished counter and looks around. The chairs rest at easy angles. Blankets wait within reach. Every lamp makes its own gentle circle. Bracken has chosen the wicker basket in the front window, where he can observe arrivals without surrendering his comfort. Outside, Willow Lane deepens from grey into blue. Cottage lamps appear one by one, and the bakery window goes dark for the night. The clock above the counter gives a soft preparatory click. Then, just before the first hand reaches the door, the little brass bell rings once. The hand at the door belongs to Tom Bell. Elspeth looks up from the counter, though she is not surprised. The bell has always been inclined to welcome visitors in its own time, particularly on evenings when the shop is warm and the lane outside has begun to darken. Tom Bell enters first, bringing with him the clean, cool scent of evening air. His post-bag is at home, his round is finished, and he is wearing a soft brown jumper rather than his weatherproof coat. He pauses upon the mat and looks around at the lamps, the angled chairs, and the blankets folded within reach. Then he notices the cream card on the counter. Read, rest, or simply listen to the rain. Tom says that this appears to cover everything he had hoped to do with his evening. Elspeth pours tea into a blue mug and points out the chair near the travel shelves. His book of railway sketches is already waiting on its seat, with the blue string tucked inside to mark the next journey. Tom settles with a quiet sigh. He places both feet upon the little wooden stool and opens the book to a chapter about a branch line beside a river. Miriam has already chosen the chair beside the stove. Her round blue tin of shortbread waits in the back room, while her Nietzsche essays rest on the small table open at the page about rain upon a greenhouse roof. She smooths the paper with one hand before taking her green mug. Arthur stands near the counter, having checked the allotment gates and put away a watering can that did not need putting away. He has brought no further tasks with him. The dried honesty stems shine in the blue jug beside him, their round seed heads as thin and silver as small moons. Arthur turns the jug by the width of a finger. The shadows settle more evenly on the wall. Satisfied, he takes the chair near the gardening books and lays the old diary across his knees. Clara has brought a folded blanket from the blue-gated pottage. She says it seems more at home in the shop for the evening. She has begun to recognize the sounds of her cottage now. The sitting-room floorboard gives one soft complaint near the hearth, and the pipe beside the kitchen window ticks 3 times when the water grows warm. Elspeth tells her that houses often introduce themselves slowly. She takes the wicker chair near the window. Her book of English houses and gardens is on the cushion, with the pressed willow leaf still holding her place. The bell sounds again for the final visitor. Samir comes through the door with the faint scent of flour still upon him. The bakery is swept, tomorrow's first dough is measured, and the currant buns are safely in the back room. He looks at the remaining chair, and then at Bracken, who has already occupied half of it. There is room for both. Samir sits carefully, and Bracken considers the arrangement before placing one white-tipped paw against Samir's sleeve. Elspeth waits until everyone has a mug and a book. She does not stand before them or make anything that might be called a speech. She says only that they may read, rest, or listen. They may change chairs, refill their tea, take a bun, close their eyes, or go home whenever they wish. There is no proper way to spend a quiet evening. Nobody requires further instruction. For a little while, the shop contains the small sounds of people becoming comfortable. A teaspoon touches a saucer. A blanket is unfolded. Arthur eases one boot away from the stove. Tom turns his chair slightly towards the lamp. Outside, rain begins as a faint brushing against the bow windows. It is so light at first that it might be leaves moving along the glass. Elspeth lowers the kettle onto its ring. The water inside gives a gentle murmur, then grows quiet again. She chooses the armchair opposite Miriam and opens the brown book of weather essays. Bracken watches her sit, but remains beside Samir. For once, a chair has been warmed without his immediate assistance. Tom reads about a small railway station where geraniums grow in painted tubs. The writer describes a porter sweeping the platform before the first train and a waiting room with a clock that runs 2 minutes slowly. Every few paragraphs, Tom looks up towards the rain-dark window. Then he smiles to himself and continues. Miriam reads her greenhouse page. The essay notices water gathering along the panes, a coil of garden hose upon the floor, and seedlings standing in small brown pots. At the bottom of the page, she rests one finger beneath the final line. She does not turn at once. One page has been read, and the next page is willing to wait. Arthur studies the December entry in the gardening diary. There are notes about sharpening a spade, washing seed trays, and covering a bed of leeks with straw before frost. He takes a pencil from his pocket, then remembers that the margins belong to other years and other gardeners. He puts the pencil away and simply reads the old marks already there. Clara holds her book beneath the lamp. The page shows a low cottage with a tiled hall and a window seat deep enough for 2 cushions. A small terracotta pot stands upon the illustrated sill. She glances towards the back room, where her time rests beside the courtyard glass. Its leaves make a soft green shape against the darkening bricks. Samir reads one of the short folk tales. It concerns a fisherman who shares his bread with a heron, and later finds that the bird has left a silver feather near his door. There is no reward beyond the feather, and nothing is asked of him in return. The fisherman places it in a blue cup and continues mending his nets. Samir reaches the end, closes the book, and keeps one hand upon the cover. The rain strengthens a little. It runs along the gutter and falls into the courtyard barrel with a hollow, regular note. Elspeth reads an essay about mist over a field. She does not follow every sentence. Some words remain clear, while others pass like the mist itself, leaving only a sense of hedges, damp grass, and a gate standing open. This is quite enough from a book on such an evening. The clock above the counter moves steadily towards 7. Its ticking does not divide the time so much as hold it gently in place. When the hour arrives, the clock gives 7 mild chimes. Nobody starts. Tom keeps one finger between his pages. Miriam closes her eyes for the length of the final note. Elspeth rises and adds a single log to the stove. The fire receives it with a soft crack and a settling glow. In the back room, she cuts 2 currant buns into halves and places shortbread around them on a blue plate. She carries the plate through without asking whether anyone is hungry. It travels quietly from chair to chair. Arthur chooses shortbread. Tom takes half a bun. Clara breaks a biscuit into 2 neat pieces and leaves one upon her saucer for later. Samir remains asleep. His head rests against the chair back, and his closed book lies safely beneath both hands. Bracken has moved closer, forming a warm brown curve between Samir and the arm of the chair. Nobody wakes them. The room returns to its gentle pattern. Rain on glass, fire behind iron, the turn of a page, the small sound of tea being poured. The lamps make separate pools of gold, but their edges meet across the floorboards. No corner of the shop feels left out of the warmth. Eventually, Elspeth turns to the greenhouse page. She reads its first paragraph and places her library card between the leaves. Tom completes his river journey and begins another that follows the coast for 11 quiet miles. Arthur reaches January, where pale shoots wait beneath straw. Clara folds her blanket more closely around her knees. Elspeth allows the weather essays to rest closed upon her lap. For nearly an hour, nobody needs to say anything. The shop is not silent. Silence would be too empty a word for the ticking clock, the breathing cat, the stove's small size, and the rain moving steadily through the lane. It is simply quiet enough for every sound to find its proper place. At 8:30, the rain grows lighter. The steady sound upon the windows thins to separate drops, each one travelling slowly down the glass before joining the dark line of the sill. Tom is the first to close his book. He stretches his feet towards the stove and says that he has travelled beside a river, along the coast, and through 3 stations without once needing to carry a post-bag. He wraps the blue string around his bookmark and returns his mug to the back room. Elspeth tells him that mugs are allowed to remain unwashed until morning. Tom says that may be so, but a postman prefers to leave things at the proper address. He washes it, dries it with the white cloth, and sets it upside down beside the sink. Arthur leaves with him. The 2 men button their coats upon the mat, while Elspeth wraps the gardening diary in brown paper against the damp. Arthur tucks the parcel beneath his arm. Before stepping outside, he looks back at the honesty stems and says they should remain in the blue jug through winter. Their pale circles seem to hold more light than the room has given them. The bell sounds softly as Tom and Arthur walk together beneath the willow tree. Their footsteps fade towards the corner, unhurried and companionable. Miriam finishes the paragraph she has begun. She closes the nature book, leaving her library card exactly where it is, and places the green mug upon the counter. 1 page and 1 paragraph, she says, have been quite enough. Elspeth agrees that this is a generous evening's reading. Clara folds her blanket, then unfolds it again when Elspeth suggests she keep it around her shoulders for the short walk home. The blue-gated cottage is only a few doors away, but the air has cooled. They leave together. Miriam carries the shortbread tin, which is lighter now, and Clara carries her book beneath the blanket. At the door, Clara pauses to look towards the back room. The thyme makes a small shadow upon the courtyard wall. She says she will bring a wider saucer for it tomorrow. Elspeth says there is no hurry. The plant has already found a comfortable place. The 2 women pass beneath the window lamps and disappear into the soft blue darkness of Willow Lane. Samir wakes a few minutes later. He looks down at the closed folk-tale book and asks whether he has missed anything. Elspeth tells him that Tom travelled by train, Miriam read a paragraph, Arthur ate shortbread, and the rain became lighter. Bracken changed position twice. Samir considers this and says he seems to have missed exactly the right amount. He carries the remaining currant buns into the back room. There are 3 halves beneath the paper. He tells Elspeth to keep them all, but she sends one with him for the early morning. The other two are wrapped and placed in the bread tin. Samir puts on his coat, tucks the folk-tales beneath one arm, and gently moves Bracken's paw from his sleeve. The cat opens his eyes, but makes no complaint. When the bell sounds for the final visitor, the shop seems to listen to the note until it has entirely faded. Elspeth turns the sign upon the door from open to closed. She does not switch off the lamps yet. There are mugs in the back room, crumbs upon 2 saucers, and blankets resting at comfortable angles over the chairs. The room looks used in the nicest possible way. She carries the mugs to the deep sink and fills the washing bowl with warm water. A little steam rises towards the window. Blue mug, green mug, blue and white mug. Each is washed with the same slow circle of the cloth, rinsed and placed upon the wooden rack. The teaspoons make a small silver sound when she gathers them together. She folds the blankets, though not as precisely as before. Clara's chair keeps its softened hollow, and the armchair beside the stove still holds the shape of Miriam's cushion. The grey blanket is smoothed once across the back of the chair. The green one is folded into thirds and placed within easy reach of the wicker seat. The rust-coloured wool returns to its basket, though one corner trails over the rim. Elspeth leaves that corner as it is. A room that has welcomed people need not look as though nobody has ever entered it. Elspeth brushes the crumbs from the saucers into her hand. She leaves the honesty stems where they are and moves the cream card to the centre of the counter. Read, rest, or simply listen to the rain. The rain has almost stopped, but the words remain suitable. Bracken walks from chair to chair, inspecting each place in which a visitor has sat. He sniffs Tom's footstool, circles Arthur's cushion, and pauses beside the wicker chair. At the travel shelves, Elspeth finds a single crumb of currant bun on the blue string drawer. She brushes it into her palm and closes the drawer gently, leaving the ribbons, postcards, and clean paper labels in their familiar, quiet disorder. At last he chooses Samir's place near the stove. The cushion is still faintly warm. Elspeth lowers the fire guard and turns off all but the small lamp in the front window. She winds the clock by 3 calm turns and carries the empty shortbread tin to the back room. The final cup is dried and placed upon its shelf. Elspeth makes one last cup of tea for herself. She carries it to the counter and stands for a moment beneath the honesty stems, listening to water move through the gutter in smaller and smaller amounts. The tea is warm, the shop is closed, and every visitor has reached a nearby home or is walking comfortably towards one. Nothing more is required of the evening. Long after Willow Lane has gone quiet, the bookshop keeps the last of its warmth. The stove is no longer bright. Behind its little iron door, a bed of embers rests beneath a veil of ash, giving the occasional red glow before settling once more into darkness. Warmth lingers in the bricks around it, in the faded rug, and in the chair where Bracken sleeps with his chin tucked close to his white paws. The shop is closed, but it does not feel empty. The chairs remain at their easy angles. A grey blanket lies folded over one arm. The green blanket rests upon the wicker chair, and the rust-coloured wool waits in its basket beside the stove. On the counter, the honesty stems stand in their blue jug. The thin seed heads hold the window lamp in pale circles, and their shadows rest lightly against the wall. The cream card remains beneath them. Read, rest, or simply listen to the rain. The ink has dried to a soft blue. One corner of the card has lifted slightly in the warmth, making a narrow shadow upon the polished wood. There is very little rain now. Water gathers beneath the gutter and falls into the courtyard barrel one drop at a time. Each drop makes the same hollow note, though the space between the notes slowly lengthens. The courtyard stones shine beneath the back-room window. Ferns lean over the dark brick, washed clean, and the little pot of thyme stands close to the glass, where the night's cold cannot quite reach it. Inside, the mugs are dry upon their shelf. The white cloth hangs over the edge of the sink. 2 half buns sleep beneath paper in the bread tin, keeping their faint scent of spice for morning. Nothing moves among the shelves. The faded rug keeps the pattern of lamplight between its worn red and green threads. A small hollow remains in the pile where Arthur's boot rested, and another beside the stove where Bracken sat before choosing his chair. The books stand where they have been placed, some upright, some leaning gently against their neighbours. Their cloth and paper hold the quiet warmth of the day without needing to stir or whisper. A book does not mind a dark room. It can remain closed through the night, keeping every lane, garden, railway, and weathered cottage safely between its covers. The railway journeys wait at Tom's house beside his chair. The gardening diary rests upon Arthur's kitchen table near the seed catalogue. Miriam's nature essays lie beside a green-shaded lamp. Clara's book is open upon the blue-gated cottage's window seat. The pressed willow leaf marks a page showing a narrow hall, a peg for a coat, and a bowl for keys. At the bakery, Samir's folk tales rest beside his bed. The fisherman has mended his nets, the heron has left its silver feather, and the story requires nothing further until another evening. Here in the shop, the remaining books ask nothing at all. The clock above the counter ticks with the same patience it had in daylight. Its hands pass midnight without ceremony. One day has become another, though the room appears unchanged. The rolling ladder waits beside the middle shelves. It has not moved this week and is unlikely to move tomorrow. The brass rail beneath it catches one quiet line from the lamp. Brown paper lies in a neat stack below the counter. Blue string rests in the drawer of bookmarks with ribbons, postcards, clean labels, and leaves pressed flat between cards. The polished counter holds the faint marks of many hands, softened by beeswax and years. Beneath the lamp, its surface looks almost like still water. The brass bell hangs motionless above the green door. Its small clapper is still. By morning it may ring at the touch of a visitor or a moment before, but through the night it has no work to do. Outside the bow windows, Willow Lane curves away into darkness. The bakery window is unlit. The red post-box stands beneath the willow branches, its color deepened almost to brown. Cottage curtains are closed, and pale squares of moonlight rest upon two upper windows. Far beyond the lane, the high street clock gives one low chime. The sound travels between roofs, past the iron bench and along the wet paving stones. By the time it reaches the bookshop, it has become soft enough to join the ticking clock inside. Bracken turns once upon the cushion. His paw stretches into the warm place where Samir's sleeve had been. His breathing settles again, slow and regular. The little lamp in the window shines over his back and across the nearest books. It reaches no farther than it needs to. There is light enough for the green door, the cream card, and the first row of worn spines. There is warmth enough for one sleeping cat and for the last ember behind the stove door. There is quiet enough for the building to rest around them. The old floorboards ease beneath the change in temperature. One gives a small wooden click near the nature shelves. Another answers from the passage to the back room. Then the shop is still again. Minutes pass, though there is no need to count them. The air cools slowly from the window towards the shelves. It reaches the brown paper drawer, the rolling ladder, and the old clock case, but the bricks around the stove keep one mild pocket of warmth close to the floor. Bracken sleeps within that pocket, entirely certain that the night has been arranged for his comfort. The drop from the gutter falls less often. The clock continues. The lamp remains steady. If anyone were walking at the far end of Willow Lane, they might notice the warm square in the bow window and know that the shop was safely there. They would not need to knock or enter. It would be enough to see the green door beneath the willow tree and the patient light upon the glass. The lane rests. The books rest. The kettle, empty upon its ring, rests in the cooling back room. And for a long while after midnight, nothing changes, because nothing needs to change. Sunday morning comes pale and clear after the rain. Sunlight reaches Willow Lane slowly, touching the upper cottage windows first, then the willow branches, the red post-box, and the wet stones beside the bookshop step. Elspeth opens later on Sundays. There are no preparations to complete and no gathering waiting at the end of the day. She comes downstairs in a soft oatmeal cardigan and pauses before the front window. Bracken is still asleep in Samir's chair. The lamp has drawn a small circle around him through the final hours of darkness. Elspeth switches it off, and the new daylight takes its place. She turns the sign to open, though Willow Lane is quiet enough that nobody sees her do it. Then she sweeps 3 damp leaves from the step and leaves a 4th beneath the bench where it has settled neatly. Inside, she winds the clock and coaxes the stove into a small Sunday fire. Kindling catches beneath one log. The iron door warms. Bracken lifts his head, watches the first flame, and closes his eyes again. Elspeth fills the kettle and opens the bread tin. The 2 half buns have kept their soft centres beneath the paper. She warms one upon the stove, spreads it with butter, and carries it with her to her tea to the chair near the window. For a while she eats without reading. The butter melts into the cut side of the bun, and a few currants have grown plump again in the warmth. Elspeth eats slowly, holding the blue and white plate upon her knees, while sunlight travels across the lowest shelf. The shop holds small signs of the previous evening. Tom's footstool is slightly farther from the chair than usual. A clean teaspoon remains beside the blue jug. Clara's blanket has left one pale thread upon the wicker cushion. Near the stove, Elspeth finds a marbled blue bookmark upon the rug. It may belong to Samir, or it may have slipped from the bookmark drawer while she was arranging the chairs. She places it upon the counter, where its silver swirls catch the morning light. In the back room, the Times stands among beads of water on the courtyard glass. Elspeth turns the pot so that each side may receive the sun. There is already a wide saucer beneath it. She does not remember placing the saucer there, though it is the sort of thing she might easily have done while washing the mugs. It is cream-coloured, with a thin green line around the edge, and exactly the right size. Elspeth accepts its presence and pours the last spoonful of water from the kettle into the soil. By 10 o'clock, the lane begins to stir. A bicycle freewheels past the window. Someone carries a folded newspaper towards the cottages. The bakery remains closed, but the faint scent of yesterday's bread still seems to rest near its doorway. Elspeth reshelves 3 books left upon the returns table. A collection of poems goes beside the window. A book of canal walks returns to the local shelf, and the brown weather essays settle between clouds and country paths. She dusts none of them. Sunday morning does not require dusting simply because a cloth is available. Miriam passes on her way to the post-box. She waves through the glass and continues without coming in. Bracken wakes when the doorbell gives a small note in the moving air. No visitor follows it. He walks to the counter stool, sits beneath the clock, and watches Elspeth prepare a second pot of tea. The Sunday pot is smaller than the weekday one. Elspeth measures 2 spoonfuls into the warmed china, waits while the leaves settle, and pours 1 cup through the little silver strainer. The familiar actions fit neatly into the quiet room. Bracken receives fresh water and no currant bun. He accepts the first part of this arrangement more readily than the second. There is no need to discuss the reading evening, or decide whether it succeeded. The empty shortbread tin has been returned. The mugs are clean. The books have gone home with their readers. These things are sufficient. Elspeth clears the cream welcome card from the counter and takes a fresh card from the drawer. She sharpens her pencil over a small saucer and thinks for a moment. Then she writes in her rounded hand, "There is always time for 1 quiet page." She places the card beside a slim cloth-bound book. From the pavement the words are large enough to read without leaning close. A woman walking a small grey dog pauses for a moment, smiles at the card, and continues towards the high street. The marbled bookmark lies between its middle pages. The book contains short descriptions of fields, rivers, and ordinary skies, each one complete before the page is turned. Sunlight moves across the floorboards and reaches the rug. Bracken leaves Samir's chair at last, walks into the warm patch and settles there instead. The clock ticks above the counter. The kettle waits upon its ring. The honesty stems turn gently when the door opens to admit a little Sunday air. The bookshop begins another day, with nothing more expected of it than this. By Sunday evening, Willow Lane has returned to its familiar blue-grey quiet. The damp leaves beside the curb have dried at their edges. The bakery is dark. The red post-box stands beneath the willow tree, and lamps are appearing one by one behind the cottage curtains. There is no need to hurry along the lane. The old stone clock behind us has already marked the hour, and nothing depends upon arriving before the minute hand moves again. The window lamp will remain, and the green door has never been impatient. The paving stones know the way to the little bookshop, and the dark green door is visible at the far end, just where the curve begins to hide the final cottage. The bow windows hold their faded cloth-bound books. Beside them stands the slim volume chosen that morning and Elspeth's new handwritten card. There is always time for 1 quiet page. Perhaps the page will be read tonight. Perhaps it will wait until morning. A page does not measure how long anyone has stayed awake, or whether every sentence has been remembered. It is simply there whenever it is wanted. Inside the shop, the chairs have returned to their usual places, though not quite as precisely before. The floorboards remember the evening only through their small familiar creaks. Near the back room, one board answers when Elspeth crosses towards the kettle. Near the stove, another settles beneath the quiet change of warmth. The wicker chair keeps a slight turn towards the window. The footstool remains close to the travel books. A grey blanket is folded beside the stove, ready for any pair of knees that might require it. The blue jug stands upon the counter, holding Arthur's honesty stems. Their pale round shadows touch the wall when the lamp is lit. In the back room, Clara's time rests upon its cream saucer. The leaves carry the clean scent of a garden after rain. Miriam's green mug waits upon the shelf. Tom's string has become a bookmark again. Half a currant bun remains wrapped for Monday morning. These small things do not make the shop different. They only make it more completely itself. Outside, the last bus passes at the far end of the high street. Its sound reaches Willow Lane as a low, distant murmur and is gone before the willow leaves have finished moving. Elspeth stands behind the counter and listens to the evening settle. The clock gives a quiet click before the hour. The stove holds a low, even fire. Somewhere along the lane a gate closes gently and footsteps pass towards home. Bracken has chosen the front window basket. He turns 3 slow circles upon the cushion and lowers himself beneath the lamp. His striped back forms a warm curve behind the glass, and one white paw remains visible near the edge. Elspeth turns the sign to closed. She checks the kettle, folds the cloth beside the sink, and draws the back-room curtain halfway across the courtyard window. Then she switches off the lamp near the gardening shelves, the lamp beside the stove, and the little shaded lights above the middle shelves. The separate pools of gold disappear one by one, leaving the shop softer and dimmer. The front window lamp remains. Rain is not falling now, but the glass still holds the faint, clean shine left by yesterday's weather. The lamp glows within it twice, once in the room and once in reflection. Its light rests upon Bracken, the handwritten card and the worn covers nearest the glass. Beyond them, the deeper shelves fade gently into shadow. Elspeth does not extinguish it. She leaves one lamp each night for anyone passing late along Willow Lane. It asks nothing of them and promises nothing grand. It simply shows that the bookshop is there. Upstairs, a smaller lamp will be lit beside Elspeth's chair. She may read a little, or she may listen to the last Sunday sounds from the lane. If her eyes grow heavy, the book will close wherever she happens to be. Downstairs, the clock will continue its patient ticking. The fire will settle. Bracken will sleep behind the glass while the willow branches move above him. The books will remain upon their shelves, keeping soft fields, slow railways, winter gardens and lamplit cottages safely within their pages. Somewhere inside the slim book in the window, a river passes beneath a stone bridge. Somewhere else, frost forms around a gate latch, and a lantern stays alight beside a country road. Those places may continue without being watched. They will be ready again whenever the cover is opened. Nothing will be lost if the night passes unread. Nothing important will be left unfinished if sleep comes first. The lane grows darker, but the little window stays warm. Its reflection lies across the wet stones in a narrow golden shape. A late walker passes beneath the willow branches, glances towards the sleeping cat, and carries the sight of that warm window around the curve of the lane. And whenever a quiet hour is needed, the dark green door will be waiting at the end of Willow Lane, beneath the willow tree and beside the patient lamp. There is nowhere else to go tonight. The shop is safe, the fire is low, the final page may rest where it is. And now, very gently, so may you.